Why I'm Right, Part 4, including special guest Banana. Potassium will give me the energy I need to continue for a fourth hour of talking to myself. It is exhausting to keep myself company. I don't know why anyone else would do it. Here we go. I hear that when you podcast, you shouldn't eat stuff because people don't like the sound of chewing in your ear. So that's my way to keep people off of my personal journal videos. Is maybe I should just do all of these while we eat very close to the microphone. The secret to eating loud is to try to breathe heavily while you eat. Sometimes a banana hits a spot. You know what's interesting? Look at this. Because this is long and intense. It's good. It's good writing. I like it. This is just sharp. This is very. You know what? If you take my political ideas and put them over George Orwell's egotism, whatever you say this, but as an aside, look how skinny you look when you put your shoulders back. You see that? I'm like, hey, what's up? My name is Shaz. And then when you put your shoulders forward, I'm like, hey, what's up? My name is Shaz. Look how broad my shoulders are. Look how skinny my shoulders are. I'm just an effeminate little old man. And my name is Chad. That's your girlfriend. That's my girlfriend now. That's your what is it? What else do? I don't like those terms, Chad and is Chad the bad one? Let me look that up real quick. We're gonna take because I'm pretty sure this is gonna take an hour. So I'm gonna give myself a little mental break. What is a Chad? Google. A piece of waste material removed from card or tape by punching. Let me try the Urban Dictionary. That was useless. A stereotypical douchebag asshole jock frat boy with an ego the size of the planet who needs a swift roundhouse kick to the jaw, a la Chuck Norris style, even if actually issued by Chuck Norris, this punishment may be too extreme even for a Chad. Basically, they think that they're the best at everything, love to talk shit, and are a general nuisance in every way possible. A Chad is someone easy to cite as they're everywhere, but the only way to know for sure is to observe one. They typically dress in similar manner to a bro, though are not in fact bros. They either wear the latest fashionable clothing from big brands or highly expensive graphic tees, most likely of the MMA variety. They most likely sport a tribal tattoo or something of the like. They most commonly drive V6 Mustangs, S10 pickup trucks, or crotch rockets. They can be found in large numbers at frat houses, local hipster bars, and new metal concerts, which are obviously real metal shows. They often travel in groups of. This just sounds really judgmental. So if you have confidence and you're getting laid and you like nice shit, you're a Chad. But then why are they at the hipster bar? Because the hipster kids are supposed to be non-materialistic. What is the opposite of a Chad? That's what it's very dangerous to define yourself by opposition. To have a group that you're like, oh, it's funny to make fun of them. Well, who the fuck are you? What is the opposite of red? Is that the most Googled term? Chad. A female Chad is a Stacy. The opposite of Chad is a beta, cuck, neat, or a robot. So you could be either a Chad or a cuck. Who's coming up with these terms? I'm noticing that a lot of this like online culture is because where is the middle? Where is the rationality? Beta Urban Dictionary. A beta male, an unremarkable, careful man who avoids risk and confrontation. Beta males lack their physical presence, charisma, and confidence. The alpha male. So is the alpha male a Chad, or is Chad the alpha male gone wrong? The alpha male is a dominant male participating in a three-way sexual encounter involving two men and one lady. How did we just get to three ways? I don't know. What's the rule in three ways? The dicks aren't supposed to touch. So you can do whatever you want, but at no point are the penises supposed to touch. Or maybe the males aren't supposed to. I don't know. That's a story time, and then we'll get back to this. I was in this thing. I don't want to talk too much about my sexual shit because I want to do that at a different part of the website. But I was in Puerto Rico, where a lot of the like, all right, what can I do as a dude, and like, what's my own personal way of going about trying to, like, if you see a cute girl and you actually approach her, like, don't just eat what comes across your plate put there by others or by happenstance, but like be more aggressive in your, like, that's a cute girl, go talk to her, go get her. Like, be more, when a lot of guys are trying to get a girl, try to be the guy who gets her. All these little crushes I had in school and I never did anything. Well, start, now that this is where your worldview comes into it, is that it's really hard to approach a girl if you don't buy into the normal job and the normal this and that, because it's hard to, who are you? And this girl in New York did it for me. She said, you're Shaz, you're not David. And I was like, cool, fucking, that was hopeful. But girls after her, I was still David until I changed my name legally. And when I went back when did Occupy Wall Street and I hooked up with a girl there, I was Shaz. And it was easier. Shaz is more unified being, the politics, all this stuff, especially, look, I'm railing for pacifism. I'm railing against Tim Duncan. Who doesn't like Tim Duncan? Shaz doesn't, because he says I support the troops blandly. Like, I have so much of the world and dominant culture in my radar. Who's on my side? I can't even see him. When I went to Occupy Wall Street, those guys, it was like, oh my gosh, my people. And places like Slab City, other places, when I went to Puerto Rico, outside, and that's why Puerto Rico was the blossoming of my sexual identity. It was like, yeah, these people are all choosing to live outside of this empire. Down there, they don't support Columbus, or at least not the people I hung out with. They have a strong anarchist tradition, a strong nativist. They support the Taino culture, and there's just this wisdom that is earned through the nature of the patterns of the wild. And when I would go spearfishing, and even the times when there was violence around me, there's a way that things sort themselves out that is very Taoist, very Zenist, and then also I feel like programming is like that too, or technology. These problems, like Tupac said, anyone can get touched. If you don't know how to lower frequencies and energy, that's why when Drake got into it and he started going back and forth with Pusha T, his OG had to come in, and the old head, the older guy, and he had to lower down without losing respect for his guy or his side, but had to lower down the frequencies. If you don't know how to do that in the wild, then what? You're just the biggest guy on the block until someone comes, and either someone's bigger than you or a group of kids come up who can figure it out. But that's Machiavelli's The Prince. You can't just rule through fear and violence. There's a subtlety to this shit. You see that on the block. You see that in power systems of violence. There's a balance that's arrived, and it's arrived through peace and calmness. I heard this, I was going to say that three-way story, and then I got off on the Puerto Rico thing, and then it's almost 10 minutes. So we're going to say that three-way story for another time. Well, this is relevant to the Chad thing. This is how I started this. I caught myself, Shaz. See, this was my break. That was my little digression break, because I've done this for like 3 hours. I didn't know that this one piece was going to go so long, but I'm remembering really good shit here. But in times of crisis, that supposed alpha male, strong male energy leader, testosterone fueled, yelling at people, fight or flight guy, fight guy. In times of crisis, that's who people look towards for leadership. They've done these simulations. I have to look up these psychological studies, but it's a good one. And I read it somewhere. But I mean, if you read it and it says it was an actual study, and then there's some credence to it, I just have to find it. That maybe they studied like trapped people and what happens in the social dynamics by interviewing them afterwards. But if you have like a cave-in of minors and you have people for a long period of time, the one who exhibits those strong alpha tendencies are going to be put in a leadership role at first. But after the initial crisis is over and you've secured water supplies and people are chill and there's no actual existential danger, there's a second type who assumes a leadership role. It's either the first person, if he could shift, or the leadership moves away from that first person and towards the second person. And that second person, and this is exhibited over either simulations or multiple investigations of crisis situations where people are shut off. So this is like emergency crisis, like trapped in a well or trapped in a underground. But when people are in a group together, stuck in an emergency situation for long periods of time, at first you have that alpha leader, but after it moves from threat in the short term to threat in the long term, you have another type of leader who usually rises based on the study, and that's someone who exhibits female characteristics of communication and more emotional intelligence. Yeah, I don't. Maybe the jury's still out whether those are female male characteristics, but the stereotypically male aggressive person isn't the leader for the long term. It's for the short term fight or flight, which makes sense. You want that strong leader if there's an existential, like, just listen up, you motherfuckers. We're all in the same thing together. Just calm down. If people are freaking out, you're like, just calm the fuck down. Where's the water? Where's this? Where's that? Decisive action. But after we're like, fuck, it might be 2 weeks before they get down to us, knowing how deep you are. And we got that water, we have enough water to last us 1 week. And it's going to be 2 weeks until they get down to us. And we have no food. Now you start thinking long term. You start thinking, all right, how are we going to survive this? This other leadership comes out, this more emotional intelligence, because what matters for the survival of the group in the long term is to keep everyone calm. And that aggressive mentality doesn't keep people calm. It keeps people away from danger in the short term, like a sheepdog keeping you, all right, don't fucking touch the water. Someone's trying to like freak out, or someone's trying to, I'm just going to go on my own. It's like, no, you're not. Don't commit suicide. Well, let's think about this. But after you, that initial strong leader creates the identity of the group. But to maintain the identity of the group, you need communication, and you need this calming energy. And so in my life too, that plays out. That anyone I've seen in a position of power who's earned it, whether like the dude on the block everyone respected, or like someone who in business who's made a lot of money that I can tell he earned it himself, it wasn't family or this and that, they have those skill sets. They can be decisive and strong, and they don't show weakness from what I can see from our interactions. But they're very good communicators, and they're in control of themselves emotionally. And it was one of the main impulses of this year, was I've exhibited success and traits in my life of insight and ability, physically and in business and in other ways. And I think I've learned a little bit about romance and women to avoid that pitfall. But then if I had to pick a weakness, well, the ego, which I'm working on with the meditation and observing my mind and my emotions. But then also that communication too. Well, just auditing my mind this whole year, but that's good. So, as far as that threesome story, we were very drunk and we didn't speak about it, but the dude started hooking up with this girl right next to me, and I was on the same bed, and I think I grabbed her leg, and I told him words of encouragement. Good job. You're fucking her really well. Oh my gosh. That was weird. It's one of those things sometimes you get really drunk and you're just like, all right, we will not speak. We all woke up and didn't really like look at each other in the eyes, and it's like, but we hung out later on that day. Some tourists I hung out with, we all got drunk together. I was trying to hook up with his girlfriend, kind of felt bad about it. I guess that was a Chad move. By then I was like the tourist, so I guess I've played a Chad role sometimes in my life. But I worked up from a fucking dork. So like that's what it is. If you feel like you're a dork and then you work on yourself until you're physically confident, and you're confident with like girls enough that you can actually like go after girls that you want, well, I disparage that. If you weren't, I mean, that was kind of funny. Like, we weren't being immoral. I wasn't being immoral. That was just a weird, like, I was kind of trying to get with his girlfriend, but kind of felt bad about it. We were all getting drunk because we all really enjoyed each other's company, and the girl was kind of giving me signs. And then they ended up just having sex on the bed next to me, and I was just like, I guess this is a compromise, but it's kind of weird. But so that's not an official threesome. That's more voyeurism. I don't even remember most. I just remember like, kind of like feeling her up while she was riding him and being like, that's weird. Sometimes that'll happen in your adult life where you're just like, that was interesting. And then you try to avoid maybe that pattern in the future. Like, things start getting weird. That kind of like swinger energy is like, I'm not really, unless this is what I want, you learn to skip out on that stuff, all right? Like, You have that later on in life when you get these swinging energies, or these couples who are like, "Yeah, let's play." I'm like, kind of see the writing on the wall on this one. I'm friendly and polite, but at a certain time, I'm going to turn into a pumpkin if I don't leave, because I know. But more power to them. Maybe, I don't know. Will Shaz be a swinger in his old age? Is he a swinger in his young age? I think I'm a little bit more sincere. It's tough enough for me to try to find one other person to relate to romantically, and sex is still very much tied to romance in my mind. And then there's I like to get down, and I like things to be casual sometimes, but it still kind of has to be romantic. And that's the spontaneous act is romantic, and the fact that you might not see this person again, it's kind of romantic in a way, like ships meeting in the night and then pass each other. It's like, oh man, I hope that person's having a good life. So I think you can have that romantic view and still be casual and not make everything into has to be the one. But you can't have that romantic view and be dull or be desensitized where it's just sex. It's never just sex. You're sharing energy. It's a dance. It's something. So even if it's not forever and it's just that one night, there has to be a sincere connection. That's what it is. And personally, to my mind, I would always tell myself, would I have like a kid with this person? Because that's what it might end up being. The condom might break, something might happen. Fuck, I should have used more condoms in my life than I have up to this point. But good old pull-out method. Don't do as Shaz says, not as Shaz does. But I would think, like, if there's a connection, like a bond, because you don't know if it's going to be a one time or and that's a self-respect thing. I don't know how to articulate that. I've always had a level of self-respect that went beyond the shyness and went beyond the late bloomer. It was just like, no, if I'm going to share myself with someone, I've turned down stuff. And then there's a couple that, like, I probably should have turned down. But during like my early 30s, I would actually turn down opportunities, and that's when I felt like I was like, all right, this is where I want to be. I want to, like, not have to just have sex because it's offered to me, because that's a form of possible manipulation. That's why I use that pie planado. There's an arch in your foot for a reason. Your whole foot doesn't have to touch the ground. There's no matter how big your appetite is. I don't know, still figuring it out, which is why I talk about it. These are my thoughts, November 2018. Why I'm right, number 3. Number 4 now, fucking A. America is the most war-addicted country under the sun. It is a land of arms and insecurity, fueled largely by its militarized industries. But in any calculation about it, one has got to take into account its propagandized culture, the education of nearly all its inhabitants to feel alike and act like the inheritors of the Greek intellectual tradition. It is the only great country in the world that is obliged to drive millions of its nationals into incarceration camps. At this moment, after years of decreasing violent crime, politicians and media figures still decry a figment of lawlessness, praising the prisons and clamoring for more to be built, almost without opposition. And this is less from a respect for law and order than from a simple misperception that society is not safe. It is considered safe, however, to metropolitan centers economically It is considered safe, however, to metropolitan centers economically disintegrate. I'm not sure what I meant by this, because it is certain that the majority of their afflicted populations will never achieve a meaningful political identity. Crime and poverty are bound together by an invisible chain. With any sincere dedication, the criminal element can be trained, employed, reformed, assimilated into society. With any sincere investment, poverty can be eradicated. But let the priorities of elites really make themselves heard. Let the empire get a taste for foreign conquest that it cannot avoid savoring. And it is difficult for government to respond with the most pressing needs of its own people. The left-wing writers who denounce the whole of the Republicans as knuckle-draggers are grossly oversimplifying. Even among the Islamophobia of conservative Christians who are pandered to by xenophobic pitchmen, it is doubtful whether there are any purposeful bigots. The persuasion that happens in America is seldom of that kind. Nearly always it is more in the nature of economic suppression, of the rich man not allowing comfortable room for agitation. And being economic, it is total. One sees this at its most obvious in the engineered financial crisis. Was a crisis engineered or random? At the very minimal, it involved collusion among the highest players of the financial sector, with the direction of the global central banking syndicate. All the energy that activism requires is excess, and a recession is a tightening up of the excesses of democracy, as incarceration is the removal of excess citizenry. So at that time, and I think I still believe this, the boom and bust cycle also helps tighten up the ability of the population to protest, because even in Occupy, our biggest issue is we couldn't sustain the protest because of money. The only people who could sustain it were the paid activists. And then now they had an agenda that they had to promote because that was their job. Yet I do not suppose there is one solid patriot in America that can be straightforwardly intimidated with the threats of state violence. In the America of the mythic imagination, all of our revolutionary ideals could heroically be invoked like the patron saints of Republican virtue. Public life in America has never been openly oppressive. Empire has not reached the justification of power at which democratic artifice can be completely dropped, which is not to say that it does not continue to build its case. America is not the dutiful heir to Plato's halcyon republic. Halcyon's a good word, $5 word. Nor is it acting out the decadent suicide that ended the Roman Empire. More than either, it resembles a colony, a rather fancy modern colony, with not many true freedoms in it, but with all its forms of servitude bursting with options. It has rich owners who have to be obeyed, and poor workers who are of no use to the profit margins. And there is a deep conspiracy of silence about the unequal distribution of the sums of production. It is a colony in which the young are generally indoctrinated to believe that the major decisions in their life are in their own hands, and not those of the cynical and the world-weary. Still, it is a colony. It has its windows barred and its chattel numbered. You see the 5. And at the approach of a foreigner, it closes its ranks. A colony with delusions of grandeur that perhaps is as near as one can come to describing America in a phrase. Yeah, this is going to make it into the platform for running for president. See, I wrote this not even, maybe I had a vague idea that, all right, I did the governor thing, eventually I'll do something bigger. But, when I did the president idea, I forgot how much good copy was in this work. This is, reading this now, I think I glanced at the beginning, the autobiographical, I forgot that there was actually really good phrasing and metaphors. But probably the battles of the Cold War have been replaced by the asymmetrical fields of terrorism. But the end of all subsequent war has begun there. One of the dominant facts in the world during the past century has been the increase in communication among the average citizen. Resistance has not just become asymmetrical, it has become open-sourced. In the years between 1990 and 2010, it was happening with the speed of a chemical reaction. Yet at the moment of writing, it is still possible to speak of politically unorganized victims. Like the knife which has never been whetted, the lower slice of American society is still without an effective sense of common interest. After 9/11, the new conspiracy-minded netizens steadily increased their voice, but instead of translating their frustrations into a new political movement or creating coalitions, they simply challenged the powerful. Instead of translating their frustrations into a new political movement or creating coalitions, they simply challenged the powerful, entrenched narratives head-on, or were co-opted by the marginal fringes of the party duopoly. The wise chess player or general, strategist, sets up for himself a plan of approach as a path to victory, while his enemies employs the right tactics of subterfuge which are designed to steer him from this path. America is kept passive in part by an entertainment industry whose chief aim is to constantly distract its audience and considering what limited time and energy socially integ- considering what limited time and energy socially integrated citizens are left with, and considering that they have bought more into their virtual lifestyles than their actual class, which at any rate shares their immediate reality, one might have expected that the able citizens could not on their own imagine a solution to their oppression. So that's pretty accurate, and that bears off even at, this was 2008. Social media has just taken off. And I saw this on the wall. And this is also an explanation for myself. Why did I have the ideas I had? Because I wasn't socially integrated. But luckily loved enough by my family and my friends, and rounded my personality out enough and put my politics down enough to go work more on my personality and hedonism, that maybe, so I started this video talking about Chadism and other shit. And maybe that's a little silly, but if I didn't round out my personality, I'd be Julian Assange in an embassy somewhere with politics as my whole way of life. That guy was accused of rape for a lack of communication because he didn't communicate well with the girls that he was having sex with. Whether it was malicious or not was up to a court to decide, and they have sealed indictments on him for other shit, so it's not even about his sexuality, it's or his decisions or mistakes that he made now, and now it's about politics. But I wasn't trying to, and I never have, even up to this point, been trying to martyr myself for politics. It's just a lump in my throat, like Robert Frost. There's a lot of other people who feel like I do. I've met them. I'm just the guy who thinks I have something to add to the conversation. I'm going to do it in a creative way because I'm a creative. But considering what limited time and energy socially integrated citizens are left with, and considering that they have bought more into their virtual lifestyle, that's really good. So, not being socially integrated, I had more time and energy, and that's how I've come up with these ideas. That's why I don't think I'm the smartest person in the world. I say I'm 90% or above because that's what my objective measurements from testing in school say. And like physical fitness in the Army, I get 99%, 100% on the, and when I'm bad, I was in the 90s, and when I'm good, I can max them out. It'd be nice to max out the Marine physical fitness test because I always, in the back of my mind, wanted to go in the Marines because they're harder than the Army. So I have certain metrics, objective metrics by which I try to measure myself. I'd like to get into, I'm in the approaching the 80th percentile in the chess that I play on chess.com. It'd be nice to approach the 90th percentile. If I get over 2,000 in my lifetime score on 5-minute games, I'll be in the 99th percentile. But that's a lifelong ambition. But I'd just be happy to get into the 90th percentile eventually. I think that's in the 1600s. So yeah, that's not, it's one thing to talk about yourself, but objective metrics, and that's not the goal. It's just a way, that's why I throw out the SAT numbers every now and then. Speed is going to be a part of our success. So it's just a way to get on the same page quickly. You say it and then you dismiss it. I still have my blind spots. There's simple people. The dancer girl, she was by no means objective metric intelligence, but her connection to her body and whatever soul animating being is in us was off the charts. So her emotional intelligence was greater than any other person I've ever met in my life. And that's why when I go to sleep and I wake up, I think about her. Because like loving a person like that is like a different type of, that's what gives me the peace to not worry about this girl who will or won't text me back, because she's cool and all, and I recognize it in her. She might have it, but I've already seen it, and I've seen it very distilled, and I achieved the love of that person too. The dancer girl, she just she isn't it's just the same as this girl. So I'm a complicated being, I guess. So, but are me and the dancer meant to come around together? I don't know. I wonder about that. Maybe not, because I'm prideful and stubborn, and if someone won't accept me when I'm broken for, then fuck. Just when I have money, it's too late. So, I don't know. But then that's not good. We'll see. I'm open to it. In the back of my mind, I think that we should still be together, but we'll see if I still feel like that when I have a lot of options. It might just be my loneliness right now. But I dreamt about her like last night. I think it was last night. Yeah, every now and then I'll dream about her. So silly dreams, not even like anything important, just like we were together, and that stuff weighs on you. That's what this Tinder person was supposed to be, like the replacement to get me out of that funk. But no, if your heart wants to feel something, it feels something. It almost makes it worse when you try to run away from it. So it is what it is. You can put energy into yourself and life will work out. And yet somehow a solution is being imagined, taking its shape, its reality, finally even its beauty, until a time comes when stuffed shirts like Bush or Cheney will stand out as men of criminal inhumanity. As for Obama, one could not even dignify him with the name of a stuffed shirt. He is simply a hole in the air. The mishandling, or rather corporate coddling, of America's domestic problems during the housing crisis has been bad enough. But American foreign policy since his taking office is one of an increasingly belligerent, although eloquent, empire. Why? What else has he promised? What was it about the novelty of mixed race that made every American idealist do the wrong thing with so unerring an instinct? The underlying fact was that the whole apparatus of the party system has long ceased to be justifiable. There they sit, at the top of a vast pyramid, and with a nationwide political network, drawing power and influence and spending them on what? It is fair to say that the values within the Democrat and Republican parties are in many ways more similar than values outside of them. Still, the alternatives are underdeveloped. Pacifists are laughed off of the main stage. The compassionate wait eagerly, with hearts heavy within. And even as America multiplies its neglected and unemployed, only some 430 odd people, a number that could match a high school graduating class, definitely benefit from the existing party system. Moreover, the tendency of lobbies to fund candidates along vertical integrations robbed more and more of the amateur politicians of practical entry points and turned them into merely symbolic candidates, the campaigns being run for them by pro bono managers and volunteers. For long past there has been in America a professional political class, living as courtesans at the head of a government they hardly know how to run, the consummate politician, the people whose photographs you can look at in the local congressman's office and the senator, always supported by a cult of personality, the governors Cuomo and Brown, fundraiser turned Speaker Pelosi, and now even Rand Paul, trading upon the name of his simple but sincere father, all exemplify this inbred social circle. Only the entertainment industry rivals the political primacy of royal bloodlines. Only the delusional could ignore the blatant nepotism in American politics. The existence of this class of people and the institutional framework by which they attain and retain power is, by any standard, unjustifiable. Political parties are simply parasites, less useful to a society than as fleas are to a dog. So I think my logical evolution, my mental evolution was citizens audit, questioning my relationship with Shah, going back to insurance because I felt like that was my family business. No, where did it start? Because this is interesting. All these read about the Iraq War, infusion of energy. Oh my gosh, this fucking sucks. But then I was like, oh, that's not healthy. Give myself ulcers. Let's create. Picked out Ernest Hemingway. Who is this war perpetrated for? The American Empire. We're a part of the Western Canon. Well, let me take part of the Western Canon and repurpose it so you basically deconstruct the master's house to use it against him. And now I have these poems, which I think are fucking awesome. They help me articulate a lot of those emotions. Now I feel better. And also, some of them are really good. And I send to the New Yorker. The New Yorker says, no. I'm like, well, fuck you, New Yorker. I think that I know more than you. So I'm just riding. I'm on one. And then I get the DUI. I'm like, fuck, now I'm off one. All right, let me go to New York. Let me check out my bro. Go to New York, newfound swag because I have more confidence in myself as a writer. Use that swag to get a girl. Plus, just more life experience. Had another girl at the time. I was like, you know what? I'm actually pretty good at this if I try. Get the girl. And the girl told me, fuck, you can write, because I try to write. And that's how she accepted me in all my complexity and not the normal social path. Also, she was a dominatrix. So she was not the normal social path either. We find each other. You get what you put out there. Just like this girl who took me to Slab City recently. I'm putting out this anarchist, fucking anti-society vibe. And I get this girl who takes me to a fucking desert, fucking tribal wilderness. It's fucking awesome. Jumping into hot springs and like all the shit that I love to do. And nature. And the desert's beautiful at night. So many stars. I was fucking sold. Like, there's a place in my heart for that area that, like, I know I'm going back all my life now. But, anyway, aside. So, I'm in New York and I'm like, fuck, ride or die chick. This is crazy. Let's go to California. Go to California. I'm like, all right, now I got the girl. Supposedly I'm supposed to now get married and have a life. So I start working insurance in Santa Cruz because natural beauty. But I put down the politics for a while. And then after that, I was like, oh, this guy's a douchebag. He won't even fire me when I'm drunk off my ass when I'm supposed to be training. That's not a douchebag. He's a nice guy. But I'm like, I could do what he does. And so then his same age, this and that. Didn't respect him. Never respected any of my bosses. Go to Berkeley. And I'm like, all right. Let me start my own company. Let me be like Chris Buich and State Farm, Santa Cruz, in the boat harbor. Look him up. And then I go to Brooklyn and I'm smoking all this weed, which shakes off your preconceived notions. So it really shakes the etch a sketch. So I'm sitting there smoking free weed for like 2, 3 weeks, building up my lead database with my girl working, doing the right down the street. And I'm like, fuck, I don't believe in this. I don't believe in a lot of how I've been doing my life for the last year. Wait, what the fuck was I doing again? And then I see Granny D and I'm like, fuck, she's doing it. All you need to do is get out there and engage people. I can motivate people. I'm going to be a fucking citizen. I'm going to run for governor. And then I do that. And that helps synthesize a lot more political beliefs, gives me some firsthand experience of the actual bullshit of our country and how we make our laws, but out there in real life. And also just talking to fucking dozens of people out there who are like all reinforcing, yeah, there's shit's fucked up and stuff. Shit's fucked up and stuff. We don't have the language to describe our political oppression, but shit's fucked up and stuff. Not college kids, but like adults with like a second job to give her husband health insurance. Or this guy who says his company laid him off, but he had the company truck because his company said, look, we understand you're a single car family without this company truck. We don't need it. Just take care of it. Like real American shit. Fucking the artist with a NASDAQ sweater was like, you're not my type of artist who's trading stocks. The other guy who's a venture capitalist across the street in the $3.5 million houses. The college kids in Humboldt State University tell me that they're disappointed in Barack Obama, but I should invest in Bitcoin. If only, right? That tells you life's not about money. It's come across in the past so much. It was probably like 5 cents back then. But all of a sudden after that, it's like, oh shit, thank you for the love shot, but I need to get back on my grind. And you can go back to New York, and now I'm back at home. And I'm like, all right, so what was that initial impulse? And I traced it back, and I was like, it was that war. And that's what, when I was in San Francisco, it was like, what, shit's fucked up and stuff, but what's the heart of this? What's the biggest thing I could throw out there and say, look at everyone, stop, look at this. This is the fucking problem. Because it's hard to cut through the class stuff and the politics stuff and the multi-issue stuff, and it's just pick one big thing, Shaz. War. That's my family, myself, my own story. And then I start writing this. And what I've noticed when I write is I don't even know what I'm going to write until I get to the end of it, because I'm just exploring ideas. So I think where I'm at here, I'm recognizing that this was my first idea about flash politics and a new political party, which now I'm enacting. It's like I put these things away, but just because they're away in the treasure chest, if they were right, they were just sitting there waiting. So some of these ideas I have are like 8 years, 10 years marinating, but even that stuff when I went over my military career, I had bones to pick that I still have to pick with certain people and certain things that happen. So I guess that's the moralist. Kobe Bryant, whether you like him, whether you don't like him, there's issues with his character. He's kind of there's interesting things about the guy, but he has a long memory, and if he feels he's been wronged, I would recognize certain things about how he lives, but and one of the reasons why I pursue women openly is I try to not have those blind spots. That I think how he got himself in trouble was some of his blind spots, regardless of your interpretation of what he went through in his case and everything. But it's pretty transparent if you just read it and then read what he said and then read the whole details. It's not black or white, but it's pretty transparent. But if someone acted a certain way against him on the basketball court, he would remember it. And playing that team later on, a year later something, he had a long memory and he would right his wrongs, or he would, if he felt. So I guess maybe that's ego. It's not that I carry vendettas. But if I feel like something's right, and then I just hold on to it, and then I have that conversation when I can. But I don't, it's not good to not forgive people. So you forgive people, but you have like that whole one, like, Khabib had a chance to talk to Conor McGregor in the cage, and he was like, well, now we can talk. And Conor McGregor's like, it's just business. And Khabib's like, no, it's not business for me. This is more than business. It's kind of bad because he shouldn't allow his emotions to get the better of him, And then you saw that when he jumped out of the cage afterwards. But what did I say in another video? Men of honor have long memories. So to phrase it not in the way of vendetta or retributive justice or assholery or negative toxic masculinity, but if you believe in honor and justice and you believe that you're wronged, you might just do a placeholder, and that doesn't really go away. It doesn't mean that you're fuming about it, but when I work out and lift heavy shit and I think about things in my life, I think about the open conversations that I still have, and times when we can continue that conversation later on. I think that's like checking your blind spots, checking your liabilities. There's some open conversations in my life. There's some in the military, those people. It's not like I want to go talk to my commander and stuff like that, but I knew at one point I was going to speak my piece on it, which is why I kept all that paperwork. And yeah, so it was like, I put this idea about political party away for a while, but this is where I came up with it. I think I was trying to defend pacifism, and I walked myself to the fact that, oh, yeah, there's no home for pacifism in the left or the right. And if we're opposing war, and I'm aligning with now historic canon, reappropriating the Western canon, Ralph Waldo Emerson has a great speech on pacifism. So pacifism and the fact that all wars are bullshit has a long historic tradition, intellectually, and also I think, well, just if you look through history. When someone says, and that's why I said, only the dead have seen the end of war, I don't agree with that guy. I agree with other people in history who say what I'm saying, and now I'm trying to revise it for modernity. So this is a really good work, and this is the foundation of the political party idea. So let's see if I actually bring it up. By 2008, there are many people who were aware of all this. By 2010, millions more were now aware of it. But the American left obviously cannot admit to themselves that Obama is a fraud. Had they done that, they would have had to assume responsibility for his ascendancy, for it was not possible for his campaign alone to turn himself into a cultural icon, the embodiment of the American dream, consciously pandering to base nationalism and sidestepping specifics by PR grandstanding and rock star rallies. After all, he belongs to a profession, law, with a certain reputation, which is vilified constantly in public as amoral in addition to the circus of these political campaigns, every 2 years, that are drawn out as the most cynically deceptive of displays. Voters had to feel themselves true change makers, even while they recognized his institutional political mold, from cabinet choices to policy decisions. Clearly, there was only one escape for them, into stupidity. They could keep their idealism in its existing shape only by being unable to grasp that any deception was possible. Difficult though this was, they are achieving it. Largely, this is his humor, which I'm reappropriating. Largely by fixing their eyes on winning the future and refusing to notice the cost, ransom, that is being extracted from them. There is much in America that this explains. This explains the decay of independent thought due to the conformity of a sham political system which drives the more spiritual leaders out of the parties. It explains the upward immobility of the standard of living, which has actually decreased since the post-war generation. It explains the distrust of real democracy, which again and again infected the reformer. Since the 60s, every reformist movement in which America has engaged has started off outside of the cultural mainstream, after which the situation has been co-opted by cultural leaders, comparatively ignorant to the social situation. The higher idealists, drawn often from the privileged class, could never relate to the common man, because in order to do so, they would have to have been raised without privilege, which would rob them of their ability to become credentialed specialists in compassion. And I predicted this, and within a year or two, probably 2 years, I went to Occupy Wall Street and saw this all play out. This is really interesting. An educated man spends a great deal of money and, more importantly, time to learn how to justify with eloquence an empathy for suffering that is inborn, which is to say that institutional activism, especially among those of more modest means, is a leaching of raw catalysts from within oppressed communities. Institutional activists have always clung to obsolete organization methods and tactics because they inevitably see each movement as a charge of the vanguard with the ignorant masses in tow. Before the Cultural Revolution, they led with violent theory. Before the Technological Revolution, with cultural elitism. And before the present open source revolution, with technological sophistication. Even at this moment, millions of men and women in America are in immediate contact with one another, the electronic gadgets entirely useless except for as toys. It is worth noticing that technology's toys, and laterally its tools, have always been more efficient in the hands of the self-aware. But on the national scale, and increasingly on the global, self-awareness is catching up with our levels of technological ability. Within an unjust system, self-awareness is a weapon of mass destruction. It must be admitted that so long as people were separated, the methods of the American ruling class were well enough transparent. Their manufactured ideological boxes filled themselves. But today, however divided Americans might be depicted, they are at any rate not out of touch with or ignorant of their fellow citizens. Citizens are in contact as no generation of Americans have ever been. Through its vast online social networks alone, over 60% of internet users, or more than 130 million Americans, there has long been enough, isn't that quaint? That online social networks back then were 60% of Americans, and now they're close to 100% probably. This captures a certain period in American history, 2008, 2009, which it's weird, only 10 years and we're so different now. There has long been enough organizational potential for a populist flash revolution. I was predicting Occupy. As a model to organize by, and looking at them merely from a rational efficiency standpoint, traditional political parties have no point. They were evolutions of the true modern bureaucratic mold, that of the technocrat and manager, and it has long been obvious that they have insulated our democracy against any serious reform from the outside. They cannot free themselves from bureaucracy or authoritarianism, because they thrive on them. Neither could they embrace democracy if democracy means a serious threat against entrenched power. To empower voters, they would have to practice the theory of egalitarianism, which would have forced them to realize that the economic barriers by which they promote party insiders and exclude outsiders is unjust, undemocratic, and corrupt. You know what's missing here is I didn't understand consensus process until Occupy, which is an anarchist tactic. So I didn't understand horizontal organizing. So I could recognize how I didn't have all the pieces of the puzzle back then. But this is a lot to have written all this before I went through Occupy Wall Street. But it is exactly these traits that they have been created to promote. They deal with political innovators as the Gore, Kerry, Obama et al. Campaign of the 21st century have dealt with Ralph Nader by ignoring him. I was still salty because I tried to get Ralph on the ballot in California. After years of power accumulation and consolidation, they offer up only one explanation, that they are the only game in town. Therefore, it is argued they must be chosen as the lesser of two evils to the Republican poison pill. Hence, the truly frightening spectacle of fellow skull and bones elites, wildly cheered as representing the entirety of America's political spectrum, bringing choice to the American people, that choice being a minor difference of institutional policy. Even when parties had begun to grasp that virtual organization was potent, their essentially coercive nature, the huge corporate war chest that they are capable of amassing, the sort of hierarchical structure it can use, can quiet any potentially democratic unrest. At the time of the Obama campaign of 2008, anyone with an internet connection and a thirst for participatory democracy could, if inclined, make a policy suggestion on Obama's official campaign website, and yet it is openly dissected without apparent sense of irony how Obama turns to the specialists and technocrats who have given their professional careers to the study of policy issues. This vein of admitted technocracy runs right through American official life, through media interviews with specialists, experts, professionals, generals, credentialed insiders. The citizen who longs for self-governance does not have the credentials the professionals have earned. If he did, he would not hold his position as a member of the disenfranchised class of the commoner. There is a reason to think that even calls for direct democracy would be hopelessly hampered by a lack of independent organization of the newly empowered citizenry, and they're being co-opted by the parasitic corporate parties and their treetop astroturfing campaigns. The American ruling class is not altogether wrong in suspecting that populism is not on their side. It is a fact that any rich man, unless he is a saint, has more to fear from democracy than from either fascism or corporate socialism. One ought never to forget this. One ought never to forget this, for nearly the whole of American political propaganda is designed to cover it up. The natural instinct of men like Hitler, Franco, Pinochet, Suharto, etc., was to come to an agreement with business. But, and here the peculiar feature of American life that I've spoken of, the deep sense of national patriotic delusion comes in. They could only do so by defending the homeland and selling their own people on a militarized society. A truly manipulated population would have achieved this transformation without hesitancy, as in WW2 Germany. But things have not gone that distance in America. Figures who would make cringing speeches about the patriotic duty to shut the hell up are ridiculed in American media. Tossed to and fro between upholding a mythological democratic tradition and promoting their own class-centric machinations, it is impossible that men like Obama can do anything but make a sideways case for authoritarianism couched in meaningless platitudes. One thing that has always shown that the American population as a whole are morally fairly sound is that in time of war they are ready enough to believe in altruistic narratives. So I'm like deconstructing psychologically America, and I think I'm getting on point here. Several humanitarian war columns, articles, and whatnots can often be found in the most popular papers in America. That could not happen if these people were the warmongering scoundrels that they are sometimes declared to be. It is important not to mistake the motives of a misled citizenry for those of its rotten leadership, or one cannot place hope in reform. What is to be expected of an empowered America is not warfare or political turmoil, but self-governance, conscious problem-solving, a redirection of resources towards the majority of society and the benefit of the common good. They are not ignorant or not altogether ignorant. They are merely unpracticed. Only when their obstructions to self-governance are gone will the younger among them begin to learn what their true potential may hold. That's pretty good. The stagnation of social activism in the modern generation has affected everyone in America, but it is having an especially direct effect upon two important subsections of the political spectrum. One is the educated and liberal agitator, generally nicknamed the far left, and the other is the so-called Tea Party conservative. These two seemingly hostile types, symbolic opposites, the half-tenured professor with his pencil neck and formulaic brain, like a high priest, the town hall patriot with his Reagan quotes and bull-like frustration, are mentally linked together and constantly interact upon one another. In any case, they are born to a considerable extent out of the same populist frustration. 40 years ago, the social crusader was already having his identity fractured. The Northern civil rights sympathizers, the prolific highbrow families whose children were freedom riders throughout the segregated South, encouraging the rural blacks who would become the backbone of the civil rights movement from Washington, D.C. to New Orleans, R.I.P., that was right after Katrina, were criticized for being unpatriotic even before they started. The men who conspired to kill Martin Luther King Jr., however, were the very definition of patriotism, that is, agents of the state. In a wrongful death civil trial, with a verdict finally reached in 1999, a jury concluded that his assassination was an act of the United States government. Quote unquote, in answer to the question, did Lloyd Jowers participate in a conspiracy to do harm to Martin Luther King? Your answer is yes. Do you also find that others, including governmental agencies, were parties to this conspiracy, as alleged by the defendant? Your answer to this one is also yes. Judge James E. Swearingen, King family versus Jowers, and other unknown co-conspirators, to include the United States government. That's where we establish truth in society, the court of law. That's not part of our common record, that there was a conspiracy proven against Martin Luther King Jr. involving the government. That's not conspiracy theory. That's conspiracy proven fact in the court of law. Leaders like King, Malcolm, Kennedy, and again Kennedy would find no place for themselves in the modern American empire colony. In a decade, which opened with the agency assassination of the first elected prime minister of the Republic of Congo, that's Lumumba, by 1968, every one of the preceding names were added to the list of slain, patriotic, overtly civilized spooks in dark suits and black felt hats, with neatly rolled Wall Street journals crooked into their left forearm, or imposing their constipated view of Pax Americana within and without the country, one covert action at a time. The targeting of domestic leaders with mass appeal helped to staunch an upwelling of broad-based social reform, reducing activism to the statues saddest of single issues, buried deeper and deeper under waves of platitudes and mollified rhetoric. In his later years, one can see, in all of his actions, the generalist king, who more than a dream of racial equality had a suspicion that social justice spilled beyond civil rights, venturing potently into the topics of economic policy and state militarism. From that generation onward, it has been next door to impossible to create a coalition of activists to take any part in the transformative social movement. And what was true of the activist world is also true of the political candidate. The tactic of pandering to one's base replaced coalition builders. Instead of going out to carry on the fight to abolish poverty and end American militarism, MLK's legacy was diluted into purely racial terms, with whatever macroscopic message for social improvement being overshadowed by the emergence of his ideologically and ethnically blinded posterity. Now, don't think you have me in a bind today, King told the members of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference regarding his late economic activities. My inspiration did not come from Karl Marx. America, you must be born again. That's from a speech I have set to music. Reformers in subsequent generations have been actually duller and narrower in their scope than in the 60s. Economic critique remained strong in the activists, chiefly owing to recognition of the flaws in the American-styled capitalism, but the task of reforming and further still transforming the whole of America has ceased to appeal. Few reformists venture outside of their single-issue specialty if there's any way of avoiding it. The general balkanization of social activism, and to some extent, the collective American conscience that has taken place during the past decade, precipitated the emergence of right-wing populism, a kind of growth that sprouted from the neglected fields of the liberal generalist turned specialist. It should be noted that there is now no populism that is not in some sense right. Perhaps the most recognizable and ironically vilified left-wing exception has been Ralph Nader. Since Ross Perot saw his shadow, most candidates describable as populist have ridden upon a libertarian discontent with the existing bureaucracy. Necessarily so, because the party system as it is constituted has no room for him in a democracy that is simply illusionary, inhibiting both innovation and reform, and in an America ruled by political cults whose chief priority is the retention of power to represent the interests of the common citizen is to commit class betrayal. If you have the kind of sincerity that can empathize with a common man or appreciate stubborn independence, the two-party duopoly works against your gaining any important political office. The populists could find a home for themselves only in the libertarian respect for freedom among the far-right political fringe. Dennis Kucinich, for example, did not have the audacity to organize an alternative event to protest his party's anti-democratic convention, as Ron Paul and his supporters did in 2008. And I put check, question mark. Compared to Paul's consistent support from the politically dissatisfied, John Edwards' once lauded populism was a flash in the Iowa pan, and Obama, as I mentioned earlier, was a clinic in the manufacturing of a hollow brand, winning a coveted marketing industry award in the process. The emergence of the American right populism can be studied in a half dozen newspapers and magazine articles. The immediately striking thing about all these articles is their generally party-based, divisive analysis, their complete lack at all times of any social contextualization of the source of the Tea Party's attraction. There is little in them except, we're not going to finish this. Fuck, another video. We're almost done. All right, we're going to do another video and then commentary. Man, this has been a long one. 4 hours so far. All right, we are going to another video. How many? 59. So, yeah, this is good. This is a very good analysis of politics at that time and the American political spectrum at that time. And that's some of the stuff I saved. I knew that this was like a good time capsule. of my life, which is why we're making this at first an autobiography, which is really our framework of reality. Your first framework is your life. You're the story you tell yourself. But then out of that, and then me sharing my life with you and with other people, uh, we are going to figure out this whole collective reality, which seems to be under attack as our personal, individual identities and our collective identities are under attack. Good shit is worth a little bit more time putting into these videos.